Welcome to my channel. When stories get scary, leave a like and subscribe if you dare. And if you're new here, welcome. In today's video, we'll be reading from a popular subreddit. So let's begin. The first story is The House with the Red Curtains. There's a house at the end of my street with blood-red curtains. They've always been drawn, no matter the time of day or night. Kids in the neighborhood say a witch lives there. The adults say it's abandoned. But I knew there was something moving behind those curtains. When I was a kid, I would always try and catch a glimpse of what was happening inside the mysterious house. But I never got much more than a quick peek through the cracks in the curtains before an ominous shape would appear and disappear behind the red fabric. One night I was walking home from a friend's house and it started to rain. I didn't have an umbrella and I ran all the way home. As I passed the creepy house, I saw the curtains flutter. I stopped and looked over at the house, and I saw a pale hand waving at me from behind the curtain. I just stared at it for a second, not really believing what I was seeing. Then the hand waved again, this time a little slower. I couldn't help but wave back. I don't know why I did that. It seemed wrong, like a bad idea. But I did it anyway. I don't know how long we stood there waving at each other, but eventually the hand disappeared and I went on my way. The whole incident made me feel uneasy. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it was no use. That night I couldn't stop thinking about the house and the mysterious girl who had waved at me. Had she been trapped inside for years? Was she trying to get my attention? I didn't know. The next morning, I rushed out of my house and ran down the street to the creepy house. But when I got there, everything seemed normal. The curtains were still closed, but there was no sign of any movement. Had I imagined the whole thing? Maybe. But then I saw it. There was a "For Sale" sign planted firmly in the front yard. I couldn't believe it. I had never seen a "For Sale" sign in front of that house before. In fact, my parents had told me that the house had been empty for at least 20 years. No one had lived there as far back as I could remember. So who had put the "For Sale" sign out? And if someone had bought the house, why hadn't they taken the old curtains down? I decided to walk past the house later that day to see if I could get another glimpse of the mysterious girl. But when I did, the curtains were wide open. I couldn't believe it. I had never seen the inside of that house before. I hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. Inside, I saw a row of chairs facing the window. At first, I thought they were just chairs, but as I got closer, I realized that each one was occupied. There were people sitting in the chairs, but they weren't real. They were made of straw. I don't know what kind of straw they were made of, but it was clear that they were meant to represent human figures. And the way they were sitting in the chairs, it looked like they were waiting for something. I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as I realized what was happening. This wasn't just a creepy house. It was a shrine of some sort. And the girl who had waved at me from behind the curtains was probably the one who had set it up. But why? And what was she waiting for? I turned and ran from the house, not stopping until I reached my own front door. I never went back. To this day, I don't know what was going on in that house, and I'm not sure I want to find out. But sometimes when I'm home alone at night, I think I hear voices whispering from behind the walls. And sometimes I think I see a pale hand waving at me from behind the curtains. Now it's time to make your voice heard. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, experiences, or suggestions. If you dare, maybe even a spooky story of your own. Who knows? Your story may be featured in a future episode. Another story is, I see dead people. I was cleaning out my grandmother's house after she passed away. My sister and I found a trunk filled with old photographs and yearbooks. We spent hours looking through them, remembering family members we hadn't seen in years, and laughing at our grandma's crazy hairstyles in the 60s. Then we came across a picture of a young girl. She was standing in front of the house where my grandparents had lived before they moved to Florida. She looked to be around 8 years old and was smiling for the camera. Next to her was a boy the same age. I recognized both of them. It was my mom and dad. But the house in the picture was nothing like the house they had lived in. The one in the photo had a white picket fence and was painted a cheerful yellow. The house they had lived in was a dark gray and had a chain-link fence. Then I noticed the date on the back of the photo. It was 1953. But the house in the picture was the exact same one my grandparents had lived in when I was growing up in the 80s. And I know it looks like a weird coincidence, but it was the same house. How could that be? My mom was born in 1947, so she would have been around 6 years old in 1953. But that's impossible. She wouldn't have been able to take care of herself, let alone live in a house by herself. And my dad was born in 1950, so he would have been around 3 years old. It doesn't make sense. And that's not all. While we were looking through the photos, we found one of my dad as a toddler. He was sitting on the steps of the house in the picture. And in the background, we could see the same young girl we had seen in the earlier photo. She was walking down the sidewalk. It was like she was haunting us. We also found a few other photos of her, but we couldn't figure out who she was. My mom didn't know who the girl was, and neither did my aunt or uncle. No one knew who the girl was or where the photos had come from. It wasn't until my sister and I were putting the photos away that I saw a name written on the back of one of the pictures. It was Sarah Thompson. I'd never heard of a Sarah Thompson in my family, but I knew the name sounded familiar, so I typed it into Google. It turns out that Sarah Thompson had lived in that house in 1953. She was a young mother who had moved into the house with her son Billy. Her husband had died in an accident, and she was trying to start a new life. But things didn't work out, and she ended up moving out after only a few months. But here's the thing. Sarah didn't move out because she couldn't take care of herself or her son. She moved out because she was pregnant, and her in-laws kicked her out. They didn't want a grandchild born out of wedlock. When I read that, I felt a chill down my spine. Because I knew then that the girl in the photos wasn't just a random child. She was my mom. And the house in the photos wasn't just a house. It was the house where she grew up. I don't know why I never remembered these photos before. I must have been very young when we lived in that house. But it was strange to see my mom as a child and to know that she had lived in the same house as a grown woman. It made me feel like I was connected to her in a way that I never had been before. And I know it sounds like a small thing, but it meant a lot to me. I love my mom very much, and I wanted to know everything about her, even the parts of her life that she couldn't remember. So when I saw those photos, I felt like I was learning something new about her. I felt like I was getting to know her better. I know it sounds silly, but I think those photos helped me connect with my mom on a deeper level, and I'm so glad we found them. Now it's time to make your voice heard. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, experiences, or suggestions. If you dare, maybe even a spooky story of your own. Who knows? Your story may be featured in a future episode. My family is crazy. First of all, let me explain what normal is in my family. As an only child, I grew up with 3 sets of grandparents and 4 great-grandparents. None of them have ever been married or had any children other than my dad. So basically, my dad is an only child and so am I. That makes me one of the luckiest people alive. Because of this, I grew up at family gatherings that consisted of just 8 people, my parents and their 6 siblings. Oh yeah, and me. Now, if you thought that was small, this is nothing compared to the gatherings at my cousin's place. Every summer, I go stay at my cousin's place while I'm on vacation from school. I love doing this because I get to be outside a lot more, and his mom spoils me with home-cooked meals and snacks. This year, I stayed there for the entire summer. His house is big enough to fit everyone. My cousin has 2 brothers who are twins, but they don't look alike. You can tell them apart by the way they style their hair. One has a flat top, and the other has an undercut. My cousin has a mop of brown curly hair. Then there's me. I have straight blonde hair. I guess it makes sense since I'm the only non-Hispanic person in the family. The first week went by quickly. I helped my uncle fix up some things around the yard and spent most of my time with my cousin and his brothers playing video games. They're really into StarCraft. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty fun. After a few weeks, I started to notice some odd things about my aunt and uncle, like how my aunt always smiled, never blinked. Her eyes were always half closed. My uncle would stare at the TV even when it was turned off. He also talked to it sometimes. I didn't think much of it and just assumed that they were weird. Then there was dinner. Every night my family gathered together in the dining room for dinner. It was amazing. My aunt made different foods every day and the portions were huge. Sometimes I would eat so much that I wouldn't even feel like eating the rest of the day. My favorite dish was lasagna. We would have it almost every Saturday. It was so delicious. There was a big pile of it on my plate, and I was about halfway done eating it when I noticed something strange. The lasagna had no meat sauce. And then I looked at the meat sauce on the plates of my family members, and I realized that they were not touching the sauce. They just had a single bite on their fork, and that's it. That was strange. But what was even stranger was that the meal started at exactly 7:13 p.m. every night. Never a minute late. I got curious, so I decided to investigate. One night, I went downstairs at 6 p.m. to try and see what the deal was. At first, I heard muffled voices coming from the kitchen. I walked closer, and I could hear my aunt and uncle yelling at each other. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded serious. I was about to turn away when I heard my aunt say, "We'll be late again." Then they both started talking normally again. I walked past the kitchen door and peeked inside. My aunt was standing over the stove stirring something in a pot. My uncle was sitting at the table watching her. The meal wasn't ready until 7:13 p.m. I was hungry, so I sat down at the table. My family filed in and took their seats. My cousin passed me a piece of lasagna. I thanked him and took a bite. It was bland. Then I looked at the meat sauce on my plate and hesitantly dipped a fork inside. It was warm, but it felt slimy. I pushed it away. A little while later, my uncle stood up and excused himself to the bathroom. My aunt followed him. Then my grandma said, "Dinner time," and we all ate. When my uncle came back, he sat down and poured himself a glass of water. He looked at his glass intently for a few seconds, then suddenly threw it against the wall. Water splashed everywhere. Everyone stared at him. My grandma finally asked, "What's wrong?" My uncle just shook his head and calmly wiped the water off the table. After everyone finished eating, my dad asked, "Can I talk to your father for a moment?" Everyone left the table and went to the backyard. I wanted to eavesdrop, but I was already full and I didn't want to gain weight, so I went to the living room instead. After about an hour, they all came back and sat down. My aunt's smile was back. My uncle's eyes were half open, and my dad looked angry. After we finished our plates, I went back to the living room. I took out my phone to play some games, but then I heard my aunt scream, "It's too late!" I froze. What did she mean? She came running into the living room. Her eyes were wide with panic. She was holding a remote control in her hand. "Change it, change it, change it!" she cried. I didn't know what she was talking about. She dropped the remote and grabbed mine. She pressed a bunch of buttons, then shoved it in my face. "See, it's too late," she whispered. I looked at the screen. It was displaying a clock. It read 7:13 p.m. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the events of the evening in my mind. I tossed and turned in bed, but eventually fell asleep. The next morning during breakfast, my aunt was unusually quiet. She didn't talk to anyone except to answer questions when asked. She also never smiled. Her eyes were wide open. I didn't say anything, but I couldn't help but stare at her. A few days later, I was downstairs watching TV when I heard screaming again. This time, it was my uncle. I went to the backyard and saw him pacing back and forth. My dad put a hand on his shoulder to try and calm him down. My mom walked over to my aunt, who was sitting on a chair. She asked her if she was okay. My aunt looked at her and replied in a monotone voice, "Why did you tell him?" "Tell him what?" "Don't act dumb," my aunt snapped. "You know what I'm talking about. Why did you tell him about the clock?" My mom looked at my dad, who shrugged. Then my mom turned back to my aunt and replied, "He's family. I think he deserves to know the truth." "No, he doesn't," my aunt screamed. "He doesn't need to know!" She got up from her chair and walked away. When my family came inside, I noticed that the windows and doors were closed. It was unusually hot. My dad sat me down and explained some things. It turns out that my aunt and uncle aren't related to anyone in my family. They chose to live a pure bloodline. They only have children with their relatives, and they keep it a secret from everyone else in the family. I told them that I knew about the clock thing, but they just ignored me and left the room. I was confused, but I didn't press the issue. Later that night, I was watching TV in the living room when I heard screams again. This time it was my cousin, his brothers, and my dad. I ran to the backyard and saw my dad pinned to the ground. My aunt and uncle were kneeling on top of him. My cousin and his brothers were standing around them. My dad was crying. "Get off me, please," he begged. "Stop, please," my aunt screamed. "He knows too much." I was shocked. Why were they attacking my dad? I stood there frozen. I wanted to help, but I couldn't move. Then my mom came running. She tackled my aunt and dragged her off my dad. "Let me go," my aunt screamed. "He knows. He saw the clock change." "Shut up," my mom snarled. She turned to my dad and helped him get up. "Run!" she yelled. He didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted away. My mom turned back to my aunt. "You're going to pay for what you did." She punched my aunt in the face. My aunt fell to the ground. My mom jumped on top of her and started punching her. My cousin and his brothers stood around us, but they didn't do anything to help. My mom continued to punch my aunt until she stopped moving. I was scared, but I felt bad for my aunt. So I went over and knelt beside her. I checked for a pulse and turned her head to check if she was breathing. She was still alive, but barely. I called 911 and told them that my aunt was hurt. When the operator asked what happened, I lied and said that she fell. I didn't want my family to be arrested. I sat with my aunt until the paramedics arrived. She spit up blood, and then she died in front of me. Now my mom, my cousin, and his brothers are all suspects in a murder investigation. The police are looking for my dad, but I don't think they're going to find him. My family is dangerous. OP, I don't know where to start. I mean, is it weird that OP's dad didn't even realize that his own siblings weren't actually related to him? Or is it weirder that OP's family was having regular family dinners with a side of incest? And if that's not weird enough, how about the fact that they also had nightly ritual where they all gathered around the TV to watch it even though it was turned off? Are they seers? Is that why they never blinked? Were they receiving messages from the TV? Messages about the impending doom that was OP? And then there's the whole situation with the food. Apparently, they served warm, slimy meat sauce alongside perfectly cooked lasagna that had been sitting out for a while. And the part where OP says, "They chose to live a pure bloodline. They only have children with their relatives and keep it a secret from everyone else in the family." That line alone should have been its own story. This is a creepypasta about a man who lives in the apartment above me. It's titled, "The Man Who Never Leaves His Apartment." There's a guy in my building who hasn't left his apartment in years. I've lived here for 6 months and never once seen him come out. But I hear him. Every night. Talking, whispering, sometimes even laughing, but always alone. One night I was laying in my bed trying to sleep but couldn't because of the noise. So I got up and went to the living room and started watching TV to drown out the sound. But after a few minutes, that didn't help anymore. I needed to do something. I walked over to the wall and pressed my ear against it. At first, I could only hear what sounded like humming. Was it the guy again? I strained to listen. Then I heard it. A voice. It was coming from behind the wall. "Don't worry. He'll open it soon." What? Who was he talking to? And why did he sound so calm, so relaxed? I took a step back. I was suddenly very creeped out. I ran home the next day. It was a nice day. The sun was shining and birds were singing. I had to go somewhere anyway, so I decided to walk instead of taking the subway. When I got home, there was a sticky note on my door. I recognized the handwriting from the grocery list. It was our new neighbor from upstairs. He must have put it up when I was out. I opened the note and it said, "I'm sorry if I keep you up at night. I don't mean to, and also sorry for the other day. I didn't mean to scare you." I smiled and wrote down, "No worries, it's fine," and hung it back up. It was a few days before I finally worked up the courage to knock on his door. I was kind of scared, but I wanted to meet my neighbor. Also, I couldn't get the voice out of my head. Who was he talking to? Why hadn't I heard him before? Had he always been there? I took a deep breath and knocked 3 times. I heard footsteps on the other side, and then the voice. "Who's there?" I called out. "Hi, I'm your neighbor. I just wanted to say hi." There was a long silence. "Oh, sure. Come in." I opened the door and stepped into the apartment. It was dark. Dust filled the air and cobwebs decorated every corner. The apartment looked like it had been abandoned years ago. In the middle of the room was a round table with 4 chairs around it. On the table was a plate with 2 slices of bread and a knife. Across from the door was a television set with an old VCR sitting on top of it. Next to the TV was a single armchair facing forward. The rest of the apartment was blocked off by a large blue curtain. My eyes weren't adjusting well to the darkness, so I struggled to make out any more details. Hello?" I called out. There was no reply. I stepped into the room further and noticed something strange on the wall. It was a calendar. It was from 2004 and circled in red ink was the month of September. What was he doing keeping a calendar from 17 years ago? And why was the apartment in such bad shape? Hadn't he been living here all this time? Was he hiding from someone? Was he being chased? Had he locked himself in here willingly? So many questions popped into my head. I wanted answers. And then he spoke. "What brings you here?" His voice was raspy, as if he hadn't spoken in a while. He stepped out from behind the curtain. He was tall and skinny with messy brown hair. His eyes were bloodshot and he had dark circles under them. He was wearing a white shirt with the sleeves torn out of them. He looked at me with an emotionless stare. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm your neighbor from downstairs. And, I just wanted to ask what that noise was the other night. You were talking to someone and I heard you." He responded by looking down at his feet and remained silent. "Was there something on your calendar?" I asked, pointing at the one on the wall. "Oh, that," he replied, looking back at me. "It's nothing." He seemed nervous and kept looking between me and the door. I started getting creeped out by his behavior, so I decided to change the subject. "So do you work? Go to school?" He didn't respond. Instead, he looked down at his feet and mumbled something under his breath. "What was that?" I asked. "Nothing," he replied, then looked away. He seemed to be avoiding eye contact. "Do you want some company?" I asked. I don't," he replied quickly. Then he looked down at his feet again. "Okay," I said. I was getting uncomfortable. "Well, nice meeting you. See you later." As I turned to leave, he said, "Wait." I stopped and slowly turned back to face him. "Can I ask you a favor?" I nodded, curious what he might ask. "Could you get me some milk from the store down the street? I'm out." I looked at him for a moment. "Sure," I replied. "What kind?" He thought for a moment. "Whole milk," he finally answered. "Thank you," he added. "It's on the corner of Elm Street. You can't miss it." I smiled. "Okay, I'll bring it back later tonight." I waved goodbye and left. Now, I didn't really want to go to the store because it was late and dark outside, and I was a little scared, but I figured it was no big deal. Also, I was curious about him. I wondered what kind of person was living in that apartment. I wondered how long he'd been living there. I wondered why he didn't leave. I wondered why he was so secretive. I wondered what happened to him. I wondered who he talked to. I wondered why he didn't have any friends. I wondered what was behind the blue curtain. I wondered what was in his past. I wondered if he had a family. I wondered if they were worried about him. I wondered if anyone cared about him. I wondered if he had a job. I wondered how he paid his bills. I wondered if he ate. I wondered if he slept. I wondered if he dreamed. I wondered if he ever left. I wondered if he was happy. I wondered if he was sad. I wondered if he was lonely. I wondered if he missed his family. I wondered if he missed his friends. I wondered if he had any. I wondered if he missed the sun. I wondered if he missed the rain. I wondered if he missed the snow. I wondered if he missed the wind. I wondered if he missed the trees. I wondered if he missed the grass. I wondered if he missed the sky. I wondered if he missed the stars. I wondered if he missed the moon. I wondered if he missed the world. I wondered if he missed me. When I got to the store, it was closed. Of course it was. It's 9 p.m. on a Sunday. What did I expect? I felt stupid. So I turned around and headed back home. As I was walking, I thought about going to the store tomorrow and getting him some milk then. Maybe I would get him some cookies or something else he might like. Maybe I would ask him some questions. Maybe we would become friends. Suddenly, I wasn't so afraid anymore. I felt bad. Bad for judging him. Bad for assuming things about him. Bad for thinking he was weird. He probably just needed someone to talk to. Maybe I could be that someone. Maybe he just wanted to know that someone cared. Maybe I could be that someone. When I got home, I unlocked the door and entered the apartment. I walked into the living room and saw the TV was on. I was watching a show from the 80s. How did he turn it on without electricity, I thought. He must have a generator somewhere. I heard a crash from behind the curtain. I froze. Then I slowly walked towards it. As I peeked around the corner, I saw him sitting on the floor with a blanket wrapped around him. He was crying. "Hey," I said quietly. "Are you okay?" He jumped and looked at me with wide eyes. You scared me," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to," I said. "Do you want to talk about it?" He shook his head and stood up. "No, it's nothing." I stepped closer. "Please, you can tell me." He backed away. "No," I said, "it's nothing." He fell back onto the ground and wrapped the blanket tighter around him. I didn't know what to do. Should I stay? Should I leave? Are you sure you're okay?" I asked. He didn't respond. "If you need anything, just call me." I turned to leave. "Wait," he said. "Can you get me some milk from the store down the street?" "I'm out." I turned back to face him. "Sure," I replied. "What kind?" "Whole milk," he answered. "Thank you," he added. "It's on the corner of Elm Street. You can't miss it." I smiled. "Okay, I'll bring it back later tonight." I waved goodbye and left. When I got back to the apartment, I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still no answer. I tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was empty. I called out, "Hello?" But there was no reply. I walked into the living room and saw the TV was on. It was playing static. I turned it off and walked over to the calendar on the wall. It was still there, still circled. I then noticed something else. There were 2 sets of footprints in the dust on the floor, mine and his. I looked around the room. Where was he? I checked behind the curtain, but it was empty. I searched everywhere, but I couldn't find him anywhere. And then I saw it. On the floor was a small piece of paper. I picked it up and unfolded it. It read, "Thank you for the milk. It was delicious. Now I'll never be hungry or thirsty again." Below that was a smiley face. I stared at it for a moment. Then I heard a knock at the door. I jumped and quickly tried to hide the note. But it was too late. He was standing in the doorway with a confused look on his face. "What is that?" he asked, pointing at the note. "Oh, nothing," I lied. I just, never mind," I said. "So, do you want to, watch TV or something?" He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "No." and disappeared behind the curtain. I stood there frozen for a moment. Then I slowly backed away and crept out of the apartment. I never saw him again, but every night I hear him, talking, whispering, sometimes even laughing, but always alone. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.